Good morning and welcome to another exciting edition of Day 4 with the man, Frank Scalish. We are past show number 200. Great show last week. Big shout out to Pradco and LureNet. One lucky live listener walked away with a $500 gift certificate to lurenet.com. And I was telling you, Frank, before we went live, he was deciding between just stocking up on baits or potentially the new higher end Great Lakes finesse rod. He said he messaged me. He said, "Dude," he's like, I'm torn. He's like, I'm either set for years on the baits or I've got the highest end rod that I've ever had in my hands. I said, "Dude," I said, "I can't make that decision for you."
Yeah, that's a good call. That's a personal decision. I mean, that's a hard decision to make, to be honest with you.
You cannot tell another man what rod he should put in his hands. It's a motto I've always lived by, Frank.
Oh, that's good. That's great. You should have saved that for the 200th show.
Yeah, well, it is a recorded show today. We're recording early in the week. Frank is out of pocket on Thursday morning, even though this show is airing on Thursday morning.
That is
so.
Correct.
Have you recovered from show 200 yet? I thought that was a great show, Frank.
It was a very fun show. I have to admit, it was very comical. I've got a lot of feedback from guys that watched it recorded after the fact, and they said they laughed their ass off from the beginning to the end of it.
We got to do a night show. I know we did that last year. We've yet to do that in 2025, but I feel like a live night show for our listeners and viewers who are unable to get on in the morning. Understand there's a lot of commuting, a lot of driving. But if you remember, do you remember Minnesota Josh, who was on, who I said was my
IT guy.
IT guy.
Yeah.
So after that show, he went to Mille Lacs this past week, and I guess it was like the opener.
Did he
banged out a 28-pound bag of smallmouth?
Holy smokes.
I mean, just absolute toads up there right now.
That is such a good bag for smallmouth.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, so we're going to get into some smallmouth fishing today. I think we will, but there's the smallmouth fishing is all relative to the body of waters that you're on.
Mm-hmm.
So there are destination places you can go to really have a crack at some giant smallmouths. Everybody knows, Thousand Islands, Lake Erie. We'll just say the Great Lakes. Okay. Mm-hmm. Then you've got Champlain, which is a great smallmouth fishery. And then you've got little hidden gems all across the northern.
Those are the ones that you fish
States.
That you threaten bodily harm to anybody who is in the boat with you who gives up the GPS locations of those fisheries.
Correct, because they're smaller. You know what I mean? They're smaller.
Oh yeah. Yep.
And stuff like that. So it's such a fascinating animal. So I'm kind of going down this rabbit hole, and I really wanted to thank everybody, that participated in the 200th show. I want to thank all the sponsors and people involved in it. There's so much that goes on to do these shows behind the scenes that I think a lot of people aren't aware of.
Because it seems so disorganized when we're live. Imagine if we didn't do all that behind the scenes work.
I know, exactly.
You're right though. If you think about it, we're constantly in communication with each other via text or on the phone. Every time we get off the water, you kind of tell me what's going on. I tell you what's going on. We dig into our list of show ideas. That is, we're talking about how we plan, and then I don't turn my ringer off. Unbelievable.
That's okay.
Talk about how we plan, but that you mentioned it. We stay kind of up to date on what's going on. You'll call and say, "Oh man, I got this great idea for a show on Thursday. Let's knock it out, bud."
Exactly. And it's true though. And then like nobody really knows the amount of work that you put in behind the scenes. I was fortunate enough to be there in person with you doing this while you've got 3 computer screens going and you're talking and carrying on a conversation all the while you're pulling up all this information to show on the screen. So it's really kind of an amazing thing. I on the other hand, and I have one laptop that I'm sitting in front of, and I do absolutely nothing except maybe pull up a deep dive app or a map.
Yeah, which will return
Yeah.
after this week. We are firing up the deep dive apps as we get into May and June, and the offshore structure and all that comes in. The deep dive app will play an integral role coming up.
Yeah, and there's some cool summer patterns on some of the southern fisheries that bring fish shallow and within bank range that the deep dive app will definitely help you zoom right in on those areas easily. So anyway, go ahead.
So all I was saying was I saw that there's a lot of states that have like openers that are from, I mean, I'm not in one of those states. In Oklahoma, you can catch whatever you want to catch, I think, except for like paddlefish and some trout and stuff like that. But there's no openers. But one of the things that I've seen, and one of the things that I really like about social media, is you can live vicariously through the smallmouth guys as they go on their trips. I just got back from that St. Jude a couple weeks ago where we caught some smallmouth. But it seems to me, and I know we've had Dan Miguel on before from Great Lakes Finesse, and I know you're a smallmouth guy, and I got to hang out and room with Frankie last weekend. It seems like there's a kind of some core things that you can do to get ready. And I know there's a lot of guys in Oklahoma who do an annual pilgrimage up north within the next month to get their weekly fix of smallmouth in once a year, whether it's Canada, Minnesota, the Great Lakes, anywhere up there. And I thought, me and you were talking about some of the new drops about, dude, let's do a show where we just, if you are getting ready for smallmouth season, just put together some core things that you need to go catch smallies, regardless of where you are in that greater northern area. Because they all, there's some exceptions, but don't they pretty much eat the same core staple of items, Frank, year after year?
Yeah, 100%. So the thing that I found out is that inland smallmouth, I don't want to say they behave differently than Great Lakes smallmouth, but they kind of do. Inland smallmouth have a tendency to be more like a spotted bass. And so the Great Lakes smallmouth, what you're looking for and how you're fishing it is different. It's
the same but different.
It's the same but different. Well, because you're fishing for them much deeper in certain seasons. You're looking for isolated structure, which you do inland as well, but in inland they're always going to be relating to the main river channel, secondary river channels, grass, where Great Lakes smallmouth have a big tendency to roam a lot, and so your search for them is a little bit different. But so when I get ready, especially when I was on tour, I'm going to start out with the boat, because the boat was the most important tool anywhere you go on the giant water, the Great Lakes, Champlain, anywhere you go there, your boat is a critical component. It could be scary on the Great Lakes in a bass boat. And so what I make sure of is I make sure that I have drift socks in, and we did a show on drift socks, but drift socks could save your life if you can't power up your outboard. So aside from fishing with a drift sock, I keep them in for safety reasons. In fact, I have them there permanently in my boat. I have the Hydromotive RWS 5 blade. Necessarily, it's always there. If the weather gets bad, I put it on and use that. Or if there's any inkling that the weather's going to get bad, I use that. Most of the time when I'm on the Great Lakes, I just run it from the get-go. Then I don't have to worry. So here's the deal, okay? Tackle. Great Lakes fishery tackle is so easy to rig for. So basically, I'm going to narrow it down. I have 6 or 7 spinning rods. I'm going to narrow it down to 3. And I'll tell you why and what we do with them. I have a couple of crankbait rods, and pretty much it's that easy. So I'll have my spinning rods will be braid to fluoro. So I'll use braid as a main line, fluoro leader. I'll have one with 10-pound braid, one with 12-pound braid, one with 15-pound braid.
Okay.
And then my leader lines, the lightest leader line that I have for Great Lakes is 10-pound fluoro.
So heavy.
Yeah, I have a spinning rod rigged with 8. That's specifically for Ned rigging, so I could use the lightest Ned rig possible. Because the trick to the Great Lakes fishery is a lot of times you just want your tube, your juvie craw, your Ned rig, you want it just barely touching the bottom. You want it as soft and natural as possible. There are times when I'll drag a heavy football jig and just cram it into the bottom and keep it moving and cram it, keep it moving and cram it. Those are specific techniques that I do when I know I'm on big fish and I need to get the big bite. Very specific. Drop shotting. You could drop shot with 10, 12, 15 braid, doesn't matter. Generally speaking, on my drop shot, I've got 10-pound fluoro. I have not seen where going to 6 or 8 mattered, especially on Lake Erie. Now, where Dan lives for Great Lakes Finesse, different scenario, because they have a lot of inland waters there. That
inland, like would Oneida be considered an inland?
Yeah, so Oneida would be considered inland, but some of his waters is so clean and so clear that the light line is very important. Bass don't see the fluorocarbon, but heavier fluorocarbon could change the action on some of your baits, so you have to watch what.
So like if you're throwing like a little 8-ounce stealth ball jig head on the snack craw or something, that bait is going to act totally different on 6 than it will on 10, just because of how light it is. So the lighter and smaller the bait, the more the line impacts it. But if you're dragging a tube, if you're dragging a drop shot, something like that, where you're down there in the Great Lakes, 10, great all around.
Yeah, 10's a great all around. So when you get into the 1/8 ounce jig heads and the snack craw type of stuff, you have to light line it, because you'll float the bait. The bait will never get down fast enough because you'll have a big wind bow or current bow in your line, and it's such a light presentation, it'll keep it floating, and you won't necessarily get to where you need to get it to get to the fish. So with my tubes or my juvie craws, first of all, I love the GLF head because it keeps the hook point riding up. And that's very important because it'll slide over the rocks. It won't roll over and always get hooked up. It'll slide over the rocks. So 2 things you can do with this. You could snap a tube super easy with it. In other words, you cast the tube out, it hits the bottom, you kind of keep it moving and you scoot it, and it scoots across the bottom. It's a very deadly presentation. I've had very good success with this tube head, and the hookup percentage is astronomical. And here, look, when they first came out with them, I was skeptical, because I'm always skeptical about the hook end of the business in fishing. I wanted to make sure that you get them hooked up, you keep them hooked up, et cetera, et cetera. So what I found with this situation here is, because it forces the hook point to ride up, almost all of your bites are in the roof of the fish's mouth or through the side of his cheek, and those are the hardest places for the bass to throw it. So works out phenomenally, and so that's kind of my go-to. But with tubes, with the tubes and the juvie craw thing, they're so cool, because you could go, depending on how you want to fish it, you could go 12-15 braid, and you could go 12-15 leader if you wanted to, because you could go 1/2 ounce or 3/4 ounce heads, and you'll slow the fall rate down because of the heavier line. You'll slow the fall rate down. Or if you have to fish it fast and aggressive, you can go heavier. If I need it to just float down there, then I'll go to the lighter heads and I'll just skim it across the bottom, so I'm just touching the rocks, never burying in the rocks, just want it touching the rocks. That seems to get the most bites for me on the Great Lakes. Okay. I used to carry, well, I can't say I used to carry. I still carry my jigging spoons, but with forward-facing sonar, now, I don't want to say the jigging spoon goes away, but
they play less of a role.
It plays a little less of a role, because back in the old days, I used to smallmouth fish off a 2D sonar, and I'd be right over top of them with the jigging spoon, video gaming it off my 2D sonar. And I won mega amounts of money doing that, and caught, I don't even know how many smallmouth doing that. So I still carry my jigging spoons around. I also carry casting spoons now, because with forward-facing sonar, if I see an individual, I could throw a casting spoon at it and get it going. Now, those are not high percentage stuff that I'm gonna put on every day. All right, those are conditional. The everyday stuff is, drop shot, Ned rig, tube. Those are pretty traditional Great Lakes stuff. Jig and minnow now is huge. It's huge on smallmouth. Okay. So I would say those 4 baits are probably never leave the house without them. In fact, I have a duffel bag with just Great Lakes smallmouth stuff in it. It's got my GLF baits in it. It's got my tubes in it. It's got underspins in it. It's got everything I need for the Great Lakes. It's one duffel bag, and when I go out there, I just grab the duffel bag and throw it in the boat, and I got everything I need. And then when I tell you it's a small duffel bag, it's a small duffel bag.
I found, like, for that, and I think I've seen yours, like, you get 2 of the 3600s, and you can fit every single thing that you need for smallmouth into those 2 standard size tackle bags.
Yeah, I have 2 3600s, and then what's the half one?
I know what you're talking about.
And then I've got 3 half.
Is it what's half of 3600? 12? No, 7.
I don't know what
1800s.
Yeah, I don't know. No. I don't know. They're like 6 inches by 2.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
You know what I mean? Just the little dudes. And I have those in there too, because the cool thing about it is that your lure choices are very easy.
Yeah.
Going inland, that's the trick, because now I'm going to have even on the Great Lakes, I fish a lot of crankbaits, but inland, I'm going to have my crankbaits, Carolina rig. I'm going to have my tube rigs, Juvie Craw tube, that setup, because I have seen catching smallmouth, every inland lake I go to, the tube almost never fails. So you got to have it. You just got to have it. Drop shot, that's inland as well. But to be honest with you, majority of my smallmouth inland lakes comes on a Carolina rig and a crankbait. And I'm very confident and very comfortable with that. And if I forgot my smallmouth stuff at home, I wouldn't even care, because I know I can catch them doing those things.
So as much as I hate the Carolina rig, Frank,
yes, you do.
I have seen 2 instances where the Carolina rig was getting bites that I was unable to get bites on. One was Great Lakes, Thousand Islands in the open. I had a co-angler who was throwing a Carolina rig, and in both cases, a small craw was on the back. They're throwing a speed craw.
Yep.
But just something, in a green pumpkin, and he had like 3 for 13 before, I had like a 2-pounder in the boat, and he was taking a 3/4 ounce weight and just dragging it. The other was, and I've given away some juice here, but at that St. Jude Bass Classic on the Mississippi River, Adam Bartuzek, who I fished with, big Carolina rig guy, and I watched him go whack, 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 whack on 5 consecutive casts on a current seam, just throwing a Carolina rig up and dragging it across shell while I caught one fish on a wobble head at that same time. And I mean, I would watch that Carolina rig get hung up, and he would, I mean, nothing fancy, almost like he was catfishing it, letting it do its thing down there, and then dunk, and those suckers had it choked every time. And I said, okay, there's something to this just a basic 1/2 ounce to 3/4 ounce barrel swivel, 15-pound leader on a 7.3, 7.4 medium heavy rod, and he was just cranking the smallies on it.
Yeah. So the trick to that is I use the speed craw, the Yum spine craw. The Yum spine craw has actually almost taken over my speed craw applications because the body is about a segment longer and the hook sits better in it. Essentially, the vibration on the legs is the same, but I got the back section of that bait is one section longer.
So your hook actually comes out here instead of out of the nose of the bait. So you get a truer rigging.
Correct. So the hook actually comes out because I'm using a 2-aught in it. And the hook actually comes out almost at the end of the slot, right? Keep going towards the back of the bait, right towards the back of the bait. Right there. The hook will come out right around there. Okay. And so what that gives that bait, all the front of it then moves more. It moves a lot more. And then the other trick is you have to use a monofilament leader line. You cannot get away with fluorocarbon.
To float the bait.
Yeah, fluorocarbon puts the bait on the bottom. The monofilament's going to let the bait touch the bottom, but it's not going to drag it on the bottom. There's a big difference. If you have any current down there, the monofilament's going to, keep the bait waving and, in the current and stuff. And what happens with the 3/4 ounce weight, and this is where I think people get confused. The 3/4 ounce weight is down there smashing the rocks, making noise against the bead, against the rocks, kicking up a dust cloud. So it looks like something scooting around down there, like a dust cloud. It attracts the fish to the rig. When they go up to the rig and they start to nose around on the sinker, you keep it moving. All of a sudden, your crawbait is like, oh, hey, I'm right in front of you, don't eat me. And the fish can't resist it, and they get it. And so that's the big thing with that. So I throw my craws on it, and at times I'll throw a dinger on it. It just depends. And at times I'll put a big giant tube on it.
Okay.
For smallmouth. It just depends.
So regardless of where you are, one of your bait casters is going to be a Carolina rig.
Yeah, I have
smallmouth.
I have 2 Carolina rigs in my boat, rigged and ready to roll at all times.
Go through the line or the main line rod and reel setup on that, because I feel like it's a little bit different than when you're dragging offshore for largemouth in the summertime.
Actually,
no.
Actually, I'm using the exact same setups.
Okay.
Except here's the difference. Okay. Generally speaking, I use 18 to 20 inch leader. And it's 17-pound monofilament.
Okay.
I don't go big 3-foot, 4-foot leaders.
Mm-hmm.
You run the risk of disaster. And because I'm fishing rock for smallmouth mostly, and I say that mostly, but a lot of times I'm not. I'm fishing wood too. But because I'm fishing the rock, I want everything near each other. The smallmouth bass root in the rocks. If you look at the way a smallmouth's face is built versus a largemouth's face, smallmouth are pretty much built to get crayfish. And so I want everything close. When they see the weight, hear the weight, see the dust cloud, and they go in for it, they see your bait behind it, they get it. They're generally feeding on the crayfish nose down, is what they're doing. If you have a big, long leader, they'll get attracted to your sinker. And here's what made me switch. An actual fishing experience on Lake Erie made me go to the short leader. I was throwing because in my drop shot on the Great Lakes, I have a long leader to my weight. because a lot of times you're not vertical on the fish. You're at an angle. And so we did this in one show where I showed you, if you're at an angle and this is your bait now is way closer to the bottom than if you were straight up and down on it. It would be much higher. But because you're fishing so deep and you're at an angle, I want a longer leader to keep the bait, within the range of the bottom. So with the Carolina rig, here's what happened. I was using like a 3.5 foot leader because I thought, the farther away from the weight I am, the better I'm going to be. I kept getting totally smashed, and I couldn't hook nothing. And then I realized they were biting the weight. The bait wasn't close enough. They were biting the weight. Every now and then I would catch a smallmouth, but I would get 2 or 3 bites and then finally catch one. And so it took me a second to realize they were weight biters. So I shortened up the leader and I caught every single one. And so that was the reasoning behind going to the shorter leader. Now, here's the thing. I used to always Carolina rig with fluorocarbon mainline. Until I was largemouth fishing on Santee Cooper, because I was making these bomb casts and I couldn't get hooked up good. It was just a crazy thing. So I went to 50-pound braid as my main line. And everyone thinks that's overkill, but it's not about the braid. It's about the technique. And so I use a 7.5 foot Powell Endurance, a 765, which is a 7.5 foot medium heavy. And I have 50-pound braid as my main line. And then my leader line is usually 17-pound mono. Now, the clearer the lake, you can get away with dropping your mono size down. But your drag has to be set perfect or you'll break it off every time on the hook set. So what I wind up doing is this. When I rig it up, I'll take it and I'll take my hook and I'll get about 15 feet away and I put the hook on a tree branch, not so the hook points in the branch. So the branch is in the bend of the hook.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the branch is in the bend of the hook, so it doesn't hurt my hook. Then I tighten up to the branch and I start to pull. And if my drag doesn't come out, I loosen it a little bit till the drag starts to go zzz, 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 zzz. Now I know that if I get anxious on a hook set, I'm not going to break the leader off because I'm going to get a little slippage. So here's the thing. You don't set the hook like you do when you're flipping with a Carolina rig. You don't reel down and crack them. You'll almost never get a hook in a fish that way. You just reel, tighten up, and just sweep the rod. And that's the only movement that you have. In fact, when I'm Carolina rig fishing, half the time, Frankie's like, "Do you got one?" I go, "Yeah, I got him." Because there's nothing aggressive. You have braided line, which has 0 stretch.
Mm-hmm.
If you move your rod 3 feet, you're moving the bait 3 feet. If you move your rod 5 feet, you're moving the bait 5 feet. There's no stretch. So your drag has to compensate for the lack of stretch. But trust me, you don't lose fish. You don't lose fish. And with smallmouth, here's the other thing. When you feel, don't, because sometimes they don't just smash it. Now, sometimes they masticate it, and it's like, holy crap. But sometimes you just feel don't, and you think it's a perch or a bluegill or something. It's not. I keep it moving. I never stop it. The minute I get the little tick, 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 ticks, I don't stop the thing. And then all of a sudden your rod loads up, and then you got them. That's the key to the Carolina rig. And
this is effective pre-spawn, spawn, post-spawn, 6 foot down to 30 foot.
100%. That's why I like it so much. And here gives you the ability to detect bottom composition in an instant. You could fish it quick. I know there's a lot of wobble headers out there, and I've experimented with the wobble head too. It's a ball bust to fish. It's a lot of fun. But I just think that me personally, I'm more effective with the Carolina rig because I can work it the same way. I could keep it honking. So I'm just a little bit more effective with it. But I have a bunch of them in the boat. I have a bunch of wobble heads in the boat because you can't ignore a technique that works. It's just like some days the football jig will catch more than the Carolina rig. Sometimes the wobble head will catch more than the football jig and the Carolina rig. So you could tell by the attitude of the fish. If I'm fishing super shallow rock stuff, like, 3 to 9, the wobble head's good because I can throw it out there, let it bounce, back to the boat. Boom. It's almost like crankbait fishing in a way. So, you want to have that. Big crankbaits, I never leave home without them.
And I think that's totally underutilized for someone like me who's going to go up north. Like, I've fished up north all over the place, and I've seen it. I've seen it go down on Erie. I've watched it go down on Champlain, but I myself have never gotten on. That's kind of like something that I have not been able to personally unlock. And I've never been in the boat with someone who's a big crankbaiter, but I know that especially in today's sonar, forward facing to where you can see where you're casting.
Yeah.
Those smallmouth will mash a plug sometimes.
Oh yeah. I mean, on Erie, Jonathan Van Dam beat me on Erie, with a big crankbait. And I was really mad at myself.
If you were to just have a couple cranks to make sure you wanted to take with you, just the top 2 cranks for smallmouth.
I'll give you my top 4.
Okay.
DD22, Norman DD22.
As old school as it gets.
As old school as it gets. I catch more giant smallmouth on that bait than probably any other bait I got. The Norman NXS, because I want a super fast steep diver. And I almost think that you got to have Strike King XDs.
Okay.
At least in a couple of colors, and probably the 6 and the 7.
Okay. Now I know we talk about colors a lot on this show. You actually have St. Clair craw colors, but I also know that May, June, a lot of those citrus colors come into play on the cranks as well.
100%. Once the spawn takes place, so that's called tropical shad in Norman. Essentially, it's citrus shad. Once the spawn takes place, the bass are on bait. They're just on the bait, and as the spawn winds down, you have actually late spawn is a fabulous crankbait time because you'll have some smallmouth that are still going to the beds. You'll have some smallmouth that are done and off the beds, and you'll have some smallmouth bedding. Prime crankbait time because you've got your pre-spawners that will absolutely annihilate it. You can aggravate a bedfish by dragging it, cranking it through the bedding zones. And here, smallmouth spawn, some of them spawn deep, depending on how clear the water is. So if they're spawning in 8 or 9 feet of water, crankbaits are money because you can bang them right through the beds and smallmouth react to that. And then with the post spawners, they're backing off. They're getting ready to feed, on the bait fish and everything. And so they're aggressively feeding. I haven't seen the post spawn smallmouth bite get where it's funky. What happens is if you don't find them, you won't catch them. And that's the trick during the post spawn. In fact, I had 3 days in a row of the best topwater post-spawn smallmouth fishing that I ever had in my entire life 2 years ago. We caught, almost 60, 70 a day, all on topwaters, 3 days in a row, me and my
Feel free to call me this year when that goes down.
Yeah, dude, swear. I'm not even kidding you. We were catching them on Super Spook Juniors and Crazy Shads, and it was off the hook. Like I've never had it like that before, but I got so lucky because the trick in the spring is you go to the spawning areas and you fish your way out from there.
Which we've done shows on.
Right. You can't, if you can't find them by starting out where they're going to be in the summer and fishing in. There's too much stuff to fish. So it's easier to go to the spawning beds and start fishing out from there. Once you start locating where the post spawners are, you could duplicate that all over the lake. And so then I got to be in this depth range. I got to be on the first break, or in this depth range, I got to be beyond the grass edge, or that kind of thing.
So are you using that crankbait in the Carolina rig then more as a search tool starting in, and then you're going to, once you locate them and you get a few bites on it, then you're going to pick up something that's a little bit slower moving, like perhaps a tube or a drop shot or a net or something, and then really, really kind of hunker down and maximize your bites?
If I need it. A lot of times what I find out is that the crankbait, for one, the big crankbaits give you the bite you need in a tournament. They give you the big bass. Some of the biggest smallmouth I've ever caught have come on a crankbait. The Carolina rig can be a main pattern. If I feel like there's more fish down there and I'm not catching them, then I go to the traditional stuff. And usually with the traditional stuff, I'm actually fishing specific things, specific boulders, specific rock piles, right on the edge where the rocks meet the grass, if there's grass wherever you're at, or inside swings on channel ledges where the gravels and the shell beds pile up. Then you could get real nitty gritty with, the tube, the juvie craw, the drop shot, and that can pay dividends. Even the Ned rig, we talk a lot about a Ned rig, but I don't throw the tiny, 2.5 incher a lot. Most of the time with the Ned rigs that I'm throwing, I want a bigger bass. So if I'm smallmouth fishing, I'll put the 4-inch dinger on and the 5. Because they will eat a 5 just as much as they'll eat a 4, but I notice sometimes they have a preference for the length of the bait, and they want it.
I found some smallmouth eating things off of the bottom.
That's perfect. Yeah.
But but like you talk about the kicking up stuff, like, I mean, a lot of people I think also think rock, courtesy of Ed Brinson underwater photography. But like, if you look at like when this fish eats it, like look at all that stuff that gets kicked up.
Yeah, that's all the silt that comes up from there. I have work is texting me right now, so let me just text them and tell them that we're recording.
Yeah, but I think that's interesting, especially at the beginning here. Like, watch the silt. Boom. Well, that's a horrible example of it. Where's the next one? Oh, here it is, right here. This is the one I wanted to show. See that silt that gets all kicked up right there?
Yeah, so
that's what you're hitting with the bill of the NXS.
Correct.
With the DD22, that's what you're hitting with the Carolina rig.
Yes.
That's when that heavier tube instead of a lighter tube is hitting it. It's creating the puff, so it's creating interest for those fish.
Correct. And when the crayfish scoot backwards, it's puff, 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 puff. You'll see distinct puff clouds in a row. And the Carolina rig sinker does the same thing. And the crankbait, boom, 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 does the same thing. It makes individual puff clouds. And I think that especially in the clean water stuff, that really gets the smallmouth's attention. They're right on it. You know what I mean? It's crazy. It's funny. I used to drop buoys all the time before GPSs. And I learned a long time ago, and I used to use a white string on my buoys on purpose. Before I'd pick the buoy up, I'd throw against the buoy string and catch smallmouth that would come quickly to the buoy string. Yeah.
In an hour, you'll have a fish that'll get on a vertical white buoy string.
100%.
So bait caster wise, that's, I mean, for the nitty gritty, I mean, a couple C rig rods, a couple of those crank rods, and you're good to go on that.
Yeah.
And then drop shot wise, it seems to me like day in and day out, there's a couple basic drop shot baits that work from the first, like 365 on smallmouth, and one is a minnow imitator.
Oh yeah.
And one is like a crawfish, a leech, and a vert, like some sort of hellgrammites, one of those kind
Correct.
of crawfish, a goby imitator. It seems like it's either one of the two.
Yeah, exactly. And when I first started really doing damage, they didn't have a lot of the baits they have out today. So I relied really heavily on the 4-inch Yum Dinger. That was my go-to drop shot bait back in the day.
Like nose hooked.
Yeah.
Or wacky hooked.
Nose hooked or wacky. And so the weird thing about it is that I've done finesse worms, both 4.5 inchers and 6.5 inch finesse worms, and had the same results, just fabulous results. The wacky rig was one time on Champlain. I was catching them really good nose hooking, the 4-inch dinger and a 6.5 inch finesse worm. Okay, really good. The bite waned on me, and I wound up rigging them wacky style, and went to beating the brakes off of them in the same places that I couldn't get bit traditionally. So sometimes they'll have that for whatever the reason. I don't know, because I'm not a fish, but sometimes they want that the way it is rigged wacky better than they do nose hooked, and sometimes they want it nose hooked better than they want it wacky style. So you always got to try both.
And when you're talking about the wacky style, you're talking about it on a drop shot.
Yes.
So you're taking this 4-inch dinger right here, and this part that I'm circling here, you're hooking it like a traditional drop shot bait sometimes, and other times you're literally impaling it right there. Mm-hmm. So the bait is opening and closing every time you shake the rod tip, which is that's a secret of the pros, Frank.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. And
Aaron was big on that. Aaron would wacky rig a lot of things on his drop shot.
Oh yeah.
A robo worm, a stick bait like this and stuff. A lot of the guys who are doing are finesse drop shot guys are big believers in wacky rigging that bait just right through the middle there with like just a standard drop shot hook.
Yeah, it's a very neat technique. It's one that you're not going to move around super fast. The key to that is keeping it in the same place and just shaking the rod tip, and then that bait just sits there and quivers down there, and it's almost it's irresistible to them. They gotta get it.
A quarter, 3/8, and half ounce, or are you ever going to go with the exceptionally heavy drop shot weights? It seems, when I look into your box, a lot more heavier drop shot weights than there are lighter, especially when it comes to the smallmouth. We've talked about you kind of finesse drop shotting the largemouth and grass lakes, but you want something that gets down, stays on the bottom, and still has some of those elements of the Carolina rig where you're creating the puffs and stuff on the bottom with the weight.
Yeah, because I want the heavier weights. The funny thing is I have quarter, 3/8, and halves. And on the Great Lakes, I'm using 3/8 and halves almost exclusively, because a lot of times I'm drop shotting much deeper, and I want that bait to get to the bottom. Right now, when I make a cast, I don't want it to free float and pendulum out. I want it right in where I want it. And so the heavier weight does that. Plus, depending on where you're at on the Great Lakes, especially Lake Erie, the current is astronomical on the west end and the east end of the lake. The current's astronomical because you have two funnel zones. On the east end, you got water coming in from the Detroit River. On the west end, you got water leaving to the Niagara River. and they're both neck down areas, and so especially on the east end of the lake, it necks down into buffalo, and so as the lake gets narrower, the current gets faster and faster and faster, and I found that you go too light and your bait almost never gets to the bottom. It's like, going away from you when you're fishing it. You could use that to your advantage, but that's a story for another day.
And then on the net, are you going to do the same thing? I know when Dan was on, it talked about newly released Great Lakes Finesse Ned head the Ned head right there. But I noticed when you look at it colors, you have your 1/8, but also just a 3/16 and a quarter, which traditionally a 1/4 ounce Ned head.
Yeah, it's like
when I'm used to an 1/8, a 1/10, a 15th of an ounce, but this is totally different. You're almost treating this Ned more like a finesse tube than you are floating a Ned to them.
Correct. 100%. I actually, Dan's going to get so mad at me. I actually yelled at him, not really yelled at him, but I said, dude, where's my 330 seconds? I want some light ones too, man. Because of my grass techniques with the light stuff. I wanted some light ones too. And he's like, we can't make everything all at once. Which I get. I totally get it. But it's just, that's it, really.
One of the things that I've noticed that you've not mentioned in this, which I think is interesting. So we've got the tube, a drop shot, a net, a Carolina rig, and a crank, which are there. You're going to have 5 to 7 rods in the boat. We went through all of that. That's going to take care of almost everything this time of the year. Early in the year we are 46 minutes into this. And you have not said a jerk bait one time. Is that more of a fall bait? Is that more where does the jerk bait play into this? Because we've seen tournaments on Great Lakes one on that. We've seen inland lakes one on it, but it also seems to be a little bit out of favor now, I guess.
No, I'm a jerk bait freak. I've got 4 jerk bait boxes in my boat at all times.
Yeah, I've seen them. They're immaculate.
Okay, so here's the deal. I didn't bring up the jerk bait because was talking about the techniques that are all seasons.
Okay.
From ice out until summer, I always have a jerk bait out. In the summertime, I fish jerk baits, but I'm fishing deep diving jerk baits. I'm working them like I'm having an epileptic fit on the front of the boat.
Straight reaction bite.
Total reaction bite. I'm making them eat it. I'm making them so mad.
Even in ice out, even in early spawn. So you got guys that are coming out and like if I go to Grand in March, which is kind of the equivalent of going up north in April or May, with that water temperature, I'm jerk and I'm pausing and I'm letting that fish come up to it. Right. You're not doing that with smallmouth, even in upper 40s, low 50s water.
No, you're making them eat it. Your smallmouth are out of their ever loving minds. You are making them eat it. You're aggressive because it's like a cat. It's if you ever messed around with a cat with a little cat toy, you shake it, you leave it there, you shake it, they get interested.
One time we actually have a reason for Bama to be on the show.
Right, and none of my cats.
She's nowhere to be found, neither of them.
No, and you shake it and they look and they stop and they look and they stop. And then all of a sudden you just go boom, like it's getting away and they crack it. That's how the smallmouth behave on these things. They just can't stand it.
And then color wise, so let's say I'm getting some of these packs. Is there any reason to go anything other on your plastics? We're talking tubes, we're talking Neds, we're talking small craws, some shade of green pumpkin with either a black or a gold fleck in it. Like, is there ever a time where that is not going to be a productive color for smallmouth?
No, I don't believe it is. I mean, I go green pumpkins with some type of flake in them, black. And generally speaking, if I'm throwing black, I'm just throwing all black.
Yep.
but especially on the Great Lakes. But any form of watermelon to green pumpkin is gonna work. It just works. The darker baits in off-colored water work great. Believe it or not, black and gin clear water works like a champ because it's
just shocking. But the more time I spend up north, the more guys that are serious, and Dan will attest to this. If you notice in the GLF, the Great Lakes Finesse stuff, I mean, every single color has a matte black in it.
Yes.
The black hair jig, a lot of just the standard jigs like smallmouth like black, and you could be 3 foot of visibility on an in lake or 15 foot of visibility in clear lake. All the smallmouth guys will always have black tied on.
Yeah, so I used to snorkel in Lake Erie a lot, and when I would get soft cross when I was a kid, I would snorkel for them and catch crayfish, and during the molt, most of them are soft. Temperature increase, they'll get the molt going quicker, and I would go catch these things. On Lake Erie, most of the crayfish are some kind of translucent greenish brown, almost like a green pumpkin-y brown, okay? But every now and then I would come across a water dog or leeches, and they looked jet black in the water.
Interesting.
Yeah, they were like jet black. So, and they stood out. You could see them. I mean, you could see when you're snorkeling down there and a leech or a water dog goes, you could see them. I mean, it's no, that's why black works so much. Plus at a certain depth range, your reds turn black. I think it's like after 10 feet, your reds turn black. A lot of colors mute out to black or brown.
And especially, we're not talking mainly hard baits. We're talking soft baits here that absorb light, don't reflect it, right? So the hard baits stay red deep, but like the soft baits.
Well, no, the color red will turn black at a certain depth range.
I got you.
It's just the light penetration. As the light penetration becomes less and less and less, colors, you start losing a lot of the color spectrum. And so certain colors, like I forget what color it is, but I forget the color, but a lot of them turn blue. Some of them turn black, depending on what color it is. I'm going to have to research that. That'd be
that's fine. Yeah. What I wanted to do, though, was basically get all of them together to where if this isn't, just like with largemouth, you can go down a wormhole, and we have over the 200 episodes. We've done entire episodes on each one of these techniques, but every once in a while, it's good to just put it all together. When you're working on your tackle, if you're going to jump in a buddy's boat and head up north for a week, I wanted to show that just said, hey, these are the things you need. These are the 6 to 8 rods that you need. And these are some of the basic techniques that'll get the job done, regardless of what you come across when you're looking for that trophy smallmouth.
Right. And I mean, it's really simple. Like I said, my smallmouth bag literally is a duffel bag. And you don't have to make it complicated. You can, but you don't have to. And that's really it. The safety factors, drift sock, 5-blade, the RWS from Hydromotive. If you guys are going to venture up to the Great Lakes, especially people with not a lot of big water experience, the 5-blade could be your best friend.
I like it, Frank. I will also say bring extra jig heads, extra weights, and extra drop shot weights. Every time that I have been up there every year, if I think I'm going to use 15 drop shot weights, I bring 30. It's cheap. The thing about a lot of these are their components to where for an extra $40, you can enjoy your day on the water instead of stressing out every time, you get hung up and you're like, oh crap, I'm down to 3 jig heads. When it comes to the smallmouth, when it comes to the heads, when it comes to the weights, whatever you think you'll need for that day. And you don't have to bring it all in the boat. You can have them in the truck and stuff if you're worried about the weight, but double it. I would say double it. If I think I'm going to use if I'm going to go through 6 Neds a day, I'll make sure I've got 12 that are ready to go. If I think I'm going to be drop shotting and hang up 10 times, I'll bring 20. And a lot of the times I'll also make sure, in tournament scenarios, I'll still go tungsten because of the feel, because of the hardness, and because of the size. But this is also one of the things where you can drag a lead egg sinker. You can throw a lead Ned. You can throw a lead tube jig, and it's more economical. And while it's a little bit duller feel, it's a much more pleasant experience when you're breaking off or losing baits regularly because of how you're fishing it.
Right. 29 cents versus $1.50.
Yeah.
a piece.
Yeah. So we will be back live on.
Let me get my schedule out. I like when we do this because I got my handy dandy.
May 20th. It's called May 22nd.
May 22nd.
Yeah. I'll be on the verge of heading on a pretty epic trip, Frank. We'll talk about it then. We might actually, I think May 22nd might be a good show for, unless you have something, we'll do a little brainstorming right now before we wrap things up. Giant baits. Baits. Let's do big baits. Let's do giant worms. Let's do big swim baits. When are you going to tie on big profile baits, whether they be hard baits or soft baits? I know you're dabbling with the glide bait game now. I'm showing you, I mentioned the glide baits, and look at that. The sneak. So the guys at G-Rat hooked me up, hooked me up. They also sent me enough to where I might be able to send you a couple of these, because I would love to see the Sneaky Pete in your hand. It's a 8-inch bait, 2.5 ounces, but it's very fishable. And it's also I think less than $60. I think it's like a $48-$50 bait. So it's actually a where you are up there, you can handle a pike or two on it. Yeah.
So I've been playing with Willie Pete's bait a lot. I finally got the cadence down right. It was when I first started throwing them, dude, I was like a moron. I'm like, what?
That was at the classic.
Yeah, I was like, what? And then I finally got it where I can get it going, where I can swim it at different speeds and rates. I was watching it sink on live scope, watching it sink so I could count it down and see how it behaves. So pretty soon, I'm actually going to put it to the test. And I can't wait, because I have a lake that I think I could really get them going on it. So I'm really excited about that.
That's that one right there, right?
Yes.
Yeah. The Willie P.
I'm just really excited about it. And the funny thing is, everything, there was a huge trend out, and who the hell was I talking? I was talking about this Frankie, I saw it the other day. There's a huge trend in the finesse stuff, and I get it because it's okay. But I see another trend happening, and that's going big or going home.
Yeah, it kind of came it's almost like the Jinko jeans are becoming back in fashion with the high schoolers, the big giant baggy jeans. Like back when I was in high school and stuff, that was big, and then it went to not. Now they're kind of coming back. I've noticed Court's brother's like 15, 16 years. He's 16, I think. He's back into the Jinkos. And I was like, dude, I had this with the big giant. It's the same thing with the glides. I mean, that 2011, 12, 13, you had Velvic, you had Skeet, you had Polydek, who was throwing the Roman Maid. It was like a trend, and now it's coming back, except much more sophisticated. But
way more sophisticated.
I said that I've got a trip coming up. I don't know if I can announce it or say what it is. It's a really cool opportunity that I had. So I will not be in town on May 29th. I will not be in the country on May 29th, but I will be somewhere where potentially big baits could be playing big time.
I'm just, like I said, dude, you and I have to start fishing more together to get different show kind of content.
Yeah, but we'll do the big baits. Don't forget lurenet.com loyal listener code BTL25 to get 15% off regularly priced items. And for all those who have been asking and wondering about the signature series Frank Scalish drops that have been happening, there were a hiatus for that, right? 4 or 5 months, you're not going to be missing anything the first week of the year. That first run is kind of come and gone.
Yeah, so I did 12 signature series. They ran 12 months. While those were running, I was painting another set of signature series baits. They will not be available for about 6 or 7 more months. It'll be a new set, new colors, new everything, and I will announce it in plenty of time when our first one comes out. I will announce it with plenty of time, but it's going to be probably a half a year or so before they come out again. Just for a lot of reasons, some of which, production wise, it takes a long time to manufacture those and get the colors right. So, we're going through the color approvals now, and unless they're right, they're not getting done. So it takes a little while. So just be patient. But I want them out, and I want them out right. So that's what we're doing.
I like it.
Very cool.
There's the music. All right, this has been another edition of Day 4 with the man Frank Scalish. All things just to get your smallmouth game, just a little recap to get your smallmouth game back in shape.
Little brush up.
A brush up on the smallmouth game. Same time, same place. Next week, we went from tiny stuff, juvie craws, Neds, Carolina rigs with little. We're going to talk big stuff.
Giants.
Big plastics.
Yeah.
Have we done a big bait show? Have we done a big plastic show? We've done a big worm show, I know, but I don't think we've done a big baits show.
We have never done it.
I don't care what you are. If you go and play, anytime you tie something big on, something that's just there's just a different feel to it. It feels like like you're dealing with a different animal. All right, we'll talk to everybody then. See ya.